Hello, and thank you for tuning into this Interati Studio interview at Asian Utility Week 2016. My name is Denise, and with me in the studio is Bryan Spear, MD Asia Pacific at Trilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So we are going to be talking about Trilliant's involvement within the region and specific trends that perhaps the company has picked up on.
Okay.
But first, let's start off with perhaps the current challenges that Asia's energy sector is facing. I know it's a huge region, but are there any specific challenges that have popped up perhaps over the last year that Trilliant has spotted?
Sure. No, you hit it on the head. It is a very broad region. 48 countries, and no two are alike. So there are, they all have their own unique challenges. Some are still trying to get the rural populations to have electricity. Some are dealing with reliability problems, some with very high losses, and then some are on the other end of the spectrum where they're just trying to bring in and integrate renewables at a large scale. So they're very different, but I think the one challenge that is very common across pretty much all of the region is just the growth in energy consumption. Because the living standards are improving, very rapidly here. GDP is supposed to triple by 2030, and that's will drive about an 80% increase in energy consumption. So that's a big problem. It's and I think that's something that really sets this region apart from pretty much the rest of the world.
Right. Okay. Clearly, a lot of opportunity there, right?
Yeah.
For vendors coming in and investors coming into the country. Are there any specific markets that are specifically really interesting for Trilliant right now?
Yeah, I think any of the countries that are dealing with these types of problems are of interest to us. Some are further along in addressing those challenges. So we try to look at where, first of all, where there's a need, where there's a problem to be solved, and then after you identify where there's a problem to be solved, who is actually ready to help solve it. So we try to be pretty specific. Look at the region as a whole. What are the challenges? How can we help address those challenges? And then the customers that are actually ready to embark on that. Because again, it's so broad. We can't focus everywhere. So we've been pretty deliberate in our focus of the market in specific countries where we think we can actually provide value.
Okay, and those regions or those countries, if you want to give us a bit more insight.
So I think you can. There's been some press recently on some of our activities. So we have just finished up a project in Vietnam. There's a big need there also on consumption. There's it's an interesting country because they have about 90 million people. Half of them are under the age of 30. Very rapidly growing economy, one of the fastest growing economies in the world. So there's a big need there. So that's one where we've been focused. There's an announcement coming in Malaysia as well, where we've been working with them for the last 4 or 5 years through pilots. Now they're embarking on their large, beginning on the large scale rollout. So there's a lot of activity here. Some are further along than others.
So let's talk about the evolution of technology, and it's obviously making a lot of waves in the rest of the world, and it's here in Asia right now. How will it change the energy industry in Asia?
Yeah, so I think what we've seen over the last 10 years was a kind of beginning to evolve from smart metering into smart grid, and now what we're beginning to see is a transition from smart grids into smart cities and IoT, which is a big change. There's some are projecting about 80 billion devices to be connected by 2020. That's a big opportunity. So we're seeing a lot of utilities begin to take a more holistic view and look at how they're going to use these networks, what applications they're going to be putting on these networks over the next 10 to 15 years. And even some are looking at, so they're going to put this network out there. How can they use it to create new revenue streams, new business opportunities that they never could have even thought of before? So when they start to do that, it really changes the game. And I think that's something that has put us in a unique position, and the type of platform that we provide with the extensibility, the bandwidth, it gives them the ability to add on these applications over time. Because I think the one thing that is certain is that we don't know what we're going to be doing 10 to 15 years from now. So you don't want to put in a platform or a solution that only addresses one specific application, and that's something that I think we've been able to get some real traction with in helping utilities future-proof their plans.
So a lot of these markets are becoming quite competitive now.
Yeah.
So the customer is becoming a bit more important now.
It is, isn't it?
They need to change their model to one that is a lot more customer-centric, right? And what is your view of that at the moment? Within the region, maybe you want to highlight Japan, for instance, where it's happening right now.
Yeah.
Companies like TEPCO, for instance, really need to focus in on their customer centricity.
Yeah.
What is the company's view?
So I think it's uncomfortable for a lot of utilities because a lot of them have been really good with their customers, but now the stakes are changing.
Yes.
So the ones that today are not focusing on getting closer to their customers need to be. So whether it's a market that's been opened up to competition like Japan or not, the market is going to change, and the utilities that are really innovative are working proactively before the market changes in their specific country to develop those relationships and be more engaged with the consumers. And a lot of that requires the technology to be able to provide additional value to them, and even the markets that may not change, to introduce new technologies like this that are so transformative. They've got to engage with the consumers and help them to understand what it does for them, what kind of value it brings to them, what to expect. Otherwise, it's going to be rejected. It's just human nature. So it's really interesting to see. It's something I really enjoy. I like the marketing piece of it and engaging consumers and really showing what kind of value that you're providing. And I think those that are not doing that are going to have a tough time actually moving forward at a large scale, because they have to have the regulators on board and they have to have the consumers on board, and they don't have those two things, and they get stuck in gridlock.
I think Europe, for instance, Europe and US, I think are still grappling with this idea of really engaging with the customer and finding, technology, that'll really help them to retain their customers and attract more customers. What lessons can be learned, from these countries? What can Asia learn from places that have already, been faced with this?
I think
change?
there are two different extremes that you can learn from. There were some deployments in the U.S. where the utility basically said, we own the endpoint, so we can do whatever we want. And they didn't even bother to engage the consumers, and they paid for it. They had serious pushback, and it's well documented. And then if you take the UK, for example, I think that's a completely different scenario. So they are a competitive environment. It's their livelihood is built on engaging those consumers and making them happy. And what they've seen is by bringing the technology to them, bringing value to them, they've increased they've improved their relationships with the customer, and they're increasing their market share. So it's all a matter of, the technology is the same. It's a matter of how you use it and how you engage with the consumers will determine how successful you are.
That's right. Well, that brings me to Trilliant is an end-to-end smart grid communications provider. What is Trilliant's plans in Asia? After we've just now spoken about the obstacles and the opportunities, what is the company's plans here?
So I think as I mentioned earlier, we're seeing a much different approach that utilities are beginning to take. Instead of choosing a solution for an application, they're understanding that costs them a lot more money over time, and that in addition to the total cost of ownership, there's opportunity there. There's opportunity for new income streams, new business models, improved ROI. And that's where I think we're in a unique position in the type of platform that we provide to these utilities. So we've been focused here pretty heavily over the last 4 to 5 years. We've had offices in the region for the past 4 years. We've had some good wins with our customers. Right now, we're laser focused on ensuring that our current customers are successful, because that's what the industry needs. To get the regulators and the consumers on board, the initial projects have to be successful. And in parallel with that, we're working on building our business throughout the region as well.
Yeah, all right. My very last question to you is, what would be your advice to utilities in this region?
So my advice to the utilities would be, you're never going to have all the answers when you get started. The technology that is being used today is proven. You know, they've got the utilities in this region can benefit from the lessons that were learned in North America and Europe when the technologies were still maturing, and they don't have to go through the learning curve. They don't have to go through the same pains that were gone through there. So they can really leverage those benefits. So get going. I think that you've got problems to solve. You will run into challenges, but the fundamental technology is solid now. You're going to be able to address those challenges as you go, and I think it's time to get going at a larger scale.
Sound advice. Bryan, thank you so much for coming to the studio and having a talk with us. I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you very much.
The last half day. And to our viewers, thank you so much for tuning into the session. If you're wanting more insight into Asia Utility Week, please have a look at our playlist on our website, ingerati.com. Thank you.